I'm very pleased to welcome Gadi Taub. Thank you for joining us, Gadi.
A pleasure.
The structure of Israel's constitutional crisis is truly very crazy. So you agree with that assessment, right?
Absolutely. I have to say first that I'm, by profession, I'm not a legal expert on constitutional law.
Okay.
I come from the angle of political science and political theory. And from our point of view, the whole discourse of Israel's constitution is completely skewed by obfuscating judicial sounding terms. In political science, we ask, who holds sovereignty?
Right.
The question is simple. And if sovereignty is defined as the authority of final decision over the political and legal sphere, then sovereignty in Israel resides with the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court can stop the Knesset from making new basic laws if they don't like them, right?
Yeah, so there's a two-tier problem here.
Okay.
First, they decided that the constitutional laws are a constitution that,
right,
and they invented for themselves the power of the judicial review,
right,
to strike down
any
regular legislation
attempt, right? But not only
regular legislation. So in a way they sanctified the basic laws, but now they changed the system completely, and now they exercise judicial review over basic laws. That means that first they said, tier one, right, you have a semi-constitution and they strike down laws. Now they built another one, and on this tier they can strike down the laws based on which they acquired the power of judicial review. So they're basically
it's Kafka.
They're basically cutting the tree that they are sitting on and building with it. It's a Münchhausen.
It's built on air.
Yeah, it's built on nothing. And what do they say? If you want to exercise judicial review over constitutional law, on the basis of what do you strike down constitutional laws? Absent the Constitution. Well, they invented something called the fundamental principles of the system. Nobody knows what that is.
They call it reasonableness, right?
Yeah, reasonableness is one of these things. But the idea that there are some fundamental principle of the system accessible only to jurists, means that they can invent principles written nowhere and decide that there are our fundamental law beyond the Constitution.
Interesting.
And based on that, change our Constitution. So now they have taken control on the laws that regulate their own institution. So when I say Münchhausen, I don't have a hair to pull myself up by, but you do, and they do. And,
still a little bit.
And this is a situation we are in. What they created is a complete divorce of authority from accountability. They have final authority over everything. They're not accountable
to anyone.
And this is why there is now a struggle in Israel over the Vadat Hakira Mamlachtit, the state commission of inquiry to the
October 7th.
Disaster of October 7th. But I just wanted to say that a state commission of inquiry, what they are asking for, would be appointed by the court and would therefore not hold the court accountable.
I see.
And we are saying, no, we want a commission that would also inquire the role of the court leading to the disaster.
I see. Okay, so this is something that never happens in any other Western democracy. It's important to understand that. When the executive says, I want to fire the head of the education department and replace that person with a new head of the education department, it is understood that the head of the executive, as an elected executive, has the power to build his own team in the executive branch and to decide who is in it and who is not in it, right? This is understood. That's the power of the executive. But in Israel, if the Supreme Court doesn't like the person that the executive is firing, doesn't like the fact that the executive is firing someone, or doesn't like the person that the executive is hiring, the Supreme Court can stop those appointments from happening. Is this true?
Yeah, they can stop anything, and they can overrule anything.
Would you consider it an exaggeration to state that the Supreme Court has destroyed Israeli democracy?
Oh, it absolutely has.
So it's not an exaggeration.
Israel is not a democracy. We should stop with this silly game. Israel, the sovereignty, the final authority to decide everything resides with 15 judges. If you come from political science, it's very clear to you. These are the people ruling the country. They have veto power over the appointment of their associates. And what is worse, they are woke and left. The median opinion in the court is more or less that of Meretz, a party too far left to
even exist now.
To have passed the threshold to the parliament. So
they no longer exist.
Something outside the spectrum of the Israeli electorate ruling Israel. And at one point, this structure is bound to break. The idea that you can, in a free society, impose the rules of the minority forever on the majority against its will and in direct confrontation with their opinions is ridiculous. The judges are imposing incredibly strict and progressive interpretations of international law. I'll give you one crazy example. It's so crazy, everyone says this was a conspiracy theory. And what I said is the Bibas family was viciously murdered.
Yes.
We know.
Yes.
2 children and a woman.
Babies.
And the IDF knew who the people who kidnapped them were and where they were. And we were not allowed to hit them because they do not belong formally to Hamas or Islamic Jihad. And therefore, the Attorney General of the IDF said that they are civilians protected by the first protocol of the Geneva Convention. And the Geneva Convention is intended to protect civilians who get caught in the midst of fire. So if you're in a combat zone in Ukraine and you pick up a weapon to defend yourself, you are still a civilian and you are protected. And after you lay down your weapon, the other army, it's illegal to shoot you. But these are not civilians getting caught in a combat zone. This is part of an terrorist invasion of our country, people who committed crimes against humanity. Why on earth should the IDF protect them based on the Geneva Convention? This is absurd.
It's an anti-Israeli ideology, it seems.
No, I'm not sure. They have an ideal and they see it as their job and their purview to protect their conceptions of universal human rights.
Right, but universal is not Israeli.
They're anti any country that asserts its right to protect its national identity.
So could we capture this ideology then by calling it pro-jihadi?
There are a form of autoimmune disease that the West has, in which it is more important to purify yourself by self-flagellation and declare your own guilt than it is to protect your culture and identity. And so in the name of the most radical interpretation of your own culture, you let in the very elements that would destroy it. So the woke always say that they're against racism, but they're not against racism. They're against the racism of one group.
Why does an Israeli prime minister need to do anything that the president of the United States or the president of any other country demands? Why?
Have you been here during Iron Swords?
Sure. No, I was not here.
You're not?
No.
So you would have known that they were stepping on our oxygen supply, which is ammunition. We had no ammunition.
Right, but you had no ammunition because you chose to be dependent on U.S. ammunition, right?
Do you think you can fight the U.S.? Do you think we can directly confront the U.S.? Because I think...
Are you imagining that the U.S. would ever have the right political grammar to launch a direct attack on Israel? Are you afraid of that?
The United States almost annihilated the state of Israel.
When?
And by acquiescing to the Iranian nuclear program.
Well, then they're not your friends. That's my point. If the U.S. government...
They're not always our friends. It depends. The Democratic Party is certainly not our friends. And had Kamala Harris been elected, the existence of the State of Israel would have been in danger.
Okay, so if you believe that the people running the United States are not your friends, you should not be dependent on them.
Israel cannot survive without any superpower
fine.
Support.
Here's
Ben-Gurion thought so, and he always made, Ben-Gurion, mind you, faced the United States and the Soviet Union together in 56. But he was always in search of a superpower ally, because Israel is a tiny little country in a huge, huge hostile area.
Fine, but here's the question: if the people running Israel, if the Israeli bosses, as I insist in calling them, can do something that is very easy and cheap to do, that will protect the state of Israel, they should do it. Especially if it's something that the President of the United States cannot do anything about.
We've made the serious mistakes.
The Oslo was constructed out of the Madrid Peace Conference of 1991. That's where all this business began.
In which we were forced to participate.
You were not forced to participate.
No.
You chose to participate. This is very important. I think the security...
That was Shamir. That was
Yitzhak Shamir.
There was no more stubborn prime minister ever in Israel and more resistant
Evidently,
to pressure.
he could be even more stubborn because he went
How do you know that?
Because he went to Madrid.
How do you know that they didn't have leverage to suffocate us? How do you know that?
Well, I know.
How do you know that they couldn't pass a Security Council resolution demanding inspection of our nuclear facility?
All right. So
how do you know that?
Okay, fine. So you're saying that it is possible to exert sufficient pressure on Israel that will justify an Israeli prime minister bringing the people who want to commit genocide against the Jews into the Jewish state.
What is this black and white?
I think it's black and white. I think if people want to murder all of the Jews, that's black and white. What the Israeli prime minister should have done, whoever he was, when the U.S. pressure began to bring PLO Fatah into the Jewish state, all that he needed to do was to convene a live press conference. Nobody can stop a live press conference. And Israel is always front page news everywhere in the world. So if the Prime Minister of Israel convenes a live press conference to make an important announcement about the Arab-Israeli conflict, they will all show up. You're transmitting live. Okay? And then he uses that opportunity to explain to the Israelis and to the whole world that the U.S. government is pressuring him to allow inside the Israeli state, the Jewish state, created to protect the Jews from genocide, an organization that created jihadi Iran, which is promising to commit genocide. And he lays out... Wait.
They kept saying it.
No. They never explained this. If you lay out the documentation showing that PLO Fatah created Ayatollah Khomeini, the Oslo process becomes impossible.
But why do you need that if you can prove that the Fatah is bent on destroying the Jewish state, with or without Iran? I think that the relevant question is, what is the intention of the PLO?
So you think it was moral for Israeli leaders not to explain the relationship between PLO Fatah and Iran before bringing the Oslo Accords to a Knesset vote?
I don't think it's important.
Wow.
It's not a direct testimony to Arafat's opinion.
I have to say, this was a very big pleasure. I'm I feel like I understand the Israeli constitutional crisis a lot better now. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much.